Beautiful. Okay. Awesome. So this is a presentation about positive behavior supports. And I think that you gave me a fabulous introduction there, so I won't spend too much time on this next slide, which is all about me. But I do want to mention and give special thanks to Dr. Renee Jameson, who's a psychologist that I work with here. We collaborate on similar presentations to this one, and so some of these slides are borrowing from that and our work together. And I just wanted to give credit where credit is due. So she's wonderful to work with as well. Okay, so today's learning targets, we're going to talk about the ABCs of behavior. We're going to talk about ways to support behavior change. We're going to talk through a case presentation. I have some resources for you all. And then I'm hoping that I can save some time for question and answer as well. So I'm just hoping to give you guys some resources and ideas of ways that you can work with families or things that you can recommend to families that you work with. All right, so let's get right into it. When you all are faced with difficult behaviors, or the families that you work with are, we really want you to consider the function. So this is what's called the ABCs of behavior. And when we talk about the function of behavior, we're really trying to figure out why it's happening and why it keeps going. So I think a lot of you probably have had some exposure to the idea of the ABCs of behavior, antecedent, behavior, consequence. So I'm going to try and just do this as a review in case anybody didn't touch on that recently or hasn't really thought about it in their recent work with kids and families. So. Okay, so we're trying to learn our ABCs, our antecedents, behaviors, and consequences when we're talking about a specific behavior that we're trying to work on with a family or with a kid. So let's start with the A, the antecedent. So the antecedent is what happens right before the behavior. So sometimes we can think about that like a trigger. Sometimes it's really obvious to us what is causing or triggering behavior, and sometimes it's less obvious. And so what we want to do to try to uncover that antecedent of a problematic behavior or a behavior that we want to change is to really think about what happened right before the behavior happened, to really hone in on that antecedent. The B in the ABCs is the behavior, and this is the one that is often feeling a little bit more obvious to people because it's what sticks out to you when you're watching a kid and you're seeing it happen. But it can be actually really helpful to think about the behavior as like, ooh, if I were going to describe that to someone, if I were watching it, with a video camera, how would I describe what is actually happening in that moment? What is the child saying or doing? Let's describe it so that, another person could know what that is. As an example of why this would be important to really describe the particular behavior, some people talk about like aggression as the behavior that they want to decrease for a kiddo. And we all think, oh yeah, I think I know what that means. But then when we really think about it, aggression might just be hitting, right? Or, for some people, it might include things like screaming or cursing or rough play with toys. So different people might have kind of different views of what aggression is. And that's why it's really important to define the behavior. So everybody who's working with the kiddo really can know what we're looking for and what we're trying to change. Our C is the consequence. So this is what follows the behavior. Sometimes when people hear consequence, they think it's like the punishment, like taking away Sally's dessert or something like that. And that's not what we mean when we're talking about behavior and the ABCs of behavior. It's not what we mean when we say consequence here. So it just means what happens right after the behavior, right? So doing a behavior like hitting might get a child access to a toy, like if they hit another kid and then we're able to take the toy. Or it might make all the adults that are in the room come over and quickly and like talk to them. Or it might make the kid who got hit turn red and start to talk with the kid who hit them. And so understanding the consequence or what's happening right after the behavior can really help us understand kind of how it functions and what's going on there. Okay, so when we're thinking about the function of the behavior, there are a couple different ways that behavior can work for somebody. So what's keeping it going? How's it working for them is what I mean by that. So does it get the child attention or interaction, which could be interesting and stimulating even if the attention is negative, like a reprimand. It could still be accidentally keeping a behavior going if that's sort of what's feeding this behavior for a child. Does it help the child escape or delay something that they don't like? Or another possible way that this could be happening would be that the behavior could be functioning to allow access or gain access to preferred items or activities or even sensations. So sometimes doing the behavior itself actually just feels good to the child. And so you can see when we think about it this way, really understanding, how the behavior is functioning can help us sort of plan around what are we going to change or what are we going to make different so that we're going to see this behavior less in the future. So just a quick review of the ABCs. I bet a lot of you have had a lot of that in your coursework and in your preparation for your careers. So let's look at an example together. This video, I believe I have shared sound successfully, and this video can be a little bit loud. So watch out, it has some loud crying. And I need to move it to my other screen. Let me move it to my other screen so you guys can see it and hear it. Okay. All right. You guys hear that? All right. You probably don't want to be hearing it, but.
Lola, no more Dora, honey. I'm sorry. It's time for bed. It's 7:30. No, we have to turn Dora off at 4. Yeah, no Dora. Is that a little dramatical? What is it you want, Lola? What'd you tell Mommy what you want? Dora? I'm sorry, baby, but Dora is over. No more, yeah, no more Dora.
All right. Sorry if that was too loud for anybody. So let's break that example down together, and feel free to unmute or put things in the chat to kind of work through this together. Anybody have an idea about what the antecedent or trigger was for that behavior? What do we think happened right before that particular behavior happened? Ooh, looks like maybe we have some stuff in the chat. Mom turned off Dora. Dora was turned off. Bingo. Ding, ding, ding. Awesome job, guys. Yes, so mom turned off Dora, and that kind of kicked that off for us, right? And mom said, it's bedtime. What's our behavior? What did we see? What did we hear if we were going to describe it to somebody who didn't get to see that video or hear it? Yes, crying tantrum, crying, lots of crying, kind of clinging to the remote. Poor girl. Absolutely. So yelling and crying. And then, yep, protest that Dora was gone. Yep, she was communicating that. Yep. And then the consequence. So what happened right after she was, crying and yelling? What was the immediate thing that happened, like still on the video? Mom addressed her crying. Yeah. Yep. So mom, mom gave it a lot of attention, right? She was talking to her, she was filming her. And did bedtime happen? Not right away, right? So bedtime was put off by that, right? And a possibility, which we don't know what happened after the video's over. Yeah, it also sounds like Dora played way past its original time. Good point. Good point. Dora's over at 4, but it was 7:30. What? Yeah, so it's possible that mom might turn Dora back on to stop the crying too. So when we're thinking about it, we're thinking about the likely function here. It could be avoidance or delay of bedtime. It could also be partially attention based. She's getting a lot of attention from mom. So if that worked to get mom to turn it back on in the past, it could also be access to the preferred activity of watching Dora. So this is a really interesting example, I think, because it shows that there can be more than one function for a behavior and that these things can kind of work together. And as you can see, when we figure out like what are the ABCs, it could potentially be really helpful when we're trying to create a plan to change the behavior or see more of a different behavior that we want to see more of. So good job, everybody. Let's get right into plans to support behavior change now that we've reviewed those ABCs. You could be working with a family yourself and you might want to be using some of these strategies, or you could be working with a family that wants to use some of these strategies and you could be coaching them through that. Or maybe in your own family, you're trying out some of these things too. We know that in our practice here, a lot of us talk about how we use some of these things with our own kiddos. So, all right. So our first thing is to be planned and purposeful. We need to think about what target behaviors do we want to prevent or decrease? What replacement behaviors do I want to increase? And we'll talk more about identifying those and thinking about those in a little bit here. And then how and what will I do to kind of accomplish those things? We want to be planned and purposeful when we're trying to change behavior. So you're going to hear me really focus a lot on preventative strategies today because they usually help things go more smoothly. When we use them, we often get to avoid triggering some behaviors, which is great. So you don't even really see them. One of the first things that I want to do is I want to think about some replacement behaviors or skills that we want the child to demonstrate instead of that kind of problematic or concerning behavior that is your target. So when I think about replacement behaviors, one idea that I often talk about with families and with other professionals is what is the positive opposite of the concerning behavior? That really fits well a lot of the time for people. And some examples of like a positive opposite of like yelling might be talking quietly, right? Or crying and screaming at drop off. It might look like staying calm and saying a quick goodbye, having a quick hug from a parent. Another helpful idea is kind of thinking about behaviors that are incompatible with the target behavior, but might not necessarily be the positive opposite. So an example might be like if a child is holding your hand when they're walking, that would be an incompatible behavior with being able to run away or climb, which might be the behaviors that you guys are wanting to decrease. Because it would be really difficult to do both of those things at the same time. I'm not saying that they won't try sometimes, but it's going to make it hard if they're holding your hand for them to run away, right? And when we try to identify the replacement behavior that we want, sometimes we actually find that the child maybe needs to be taught that new skill or that new behavior, or maybe they just need more practice with it. It's not something that they are regularly using. So let's see here. Let's do a little chat here. So thinking about what we just talked about, what do you think might be a good replacement behavior to teach and to praise for a child that is grabbing toys from others? And so you guys can't really select, but you could put the ones that you think of or that you think are the best answers in the chat if you want to, or you can pop off of mute if you'd like to. So asking for a turn, cleaning up quickly, playing gently with toys, playing with a different toy. Yeah. So a positive opposite of somebody who's grabbing toys from others, I think really would be asking for a turn or playing with a different toy. I love it. That's exactly what I was thinking. Options A and D are the top two that could be good replacement behaviors for grabbing a toy. So good job. Everybody's tracking along. Another one, a positive opposite for tantrums at transition times might be playing gently, moving on to the next thing right away, or being nice. So this would be the opposite of the problem behavior, which is tantrums at transition times. Yeah, so my thought would be moving on to the next thing right away. So a transition between one activity to another is causing a kid to have a tantrum. So the opposite of that would be instead of having a tantrum at that time, they just move right on into the next activity. That was my thought process on that. Although you're right, Michelle, being nice is kind of incompatible with having a tantrum too. So, okay. Okay, so how do we teach replacement behaviors or an incompatible behavior? So some things lend themselves to games, which can be really fun, especially with kids. So the taking turns game, the sharing game, the walking game, the asking first game. You can start playing these types of games to teach kids these particular skills with an adult or using their favorite stuffed animal or a toy, and then gradually including one or more other kids if it's applicable, and just keeping it short and fun. And clearly this is going to look different for a younger kid than maybe an older kid that you might use kind of more school-like kind of teaching strategies with them. Another good strategy for a lot of kids can be something called pre-correcting. So that would be reminding kids of what the behavior is that you're wanting to see in that time of day or in that moment before things kind of start to go south. So this might sound like something like, oh, we're about to walk into the store. Remember, hands to self and walking feet. Another way to help teach a replacement behavior could be modeling. So showing the child a simple way of doing it and or saying it, whatever the target behavior is, and modeling it step by step out loud with simple language and a short justification for why we're using that new behavior. And then another fun strategy that a lot of people really like, especially Dr. Jamison, my colleague that I was talking about earlier, is video self-modeling. And so this is when we actually would create a video of the child doing the desired behavior and play that video for them to remind them what to do. So you might use that like once a day. You would just make sure that you play the video so that they remember, oh yeah, that's the behavior I'm supposed to do at this time. And then you might especially play that video right before you expect that behavior to happen. So let's say it's taking turns or asking for a turn or something like that. You could play a video of that right before the playtime that the kid is going to have, just as an example. Once we identify the replacement behavior that we want to see and we're teaching it and getting it going, we really want to reinforce the replacement behavior as we're kind of teaching it and practicing it. Okay, so one strategy that I love for people to use is something called labeled praise. So you might have heard this called specific praise. And it's a statement describing, exactly what you're praising. So instead of just saying good job, which is very nice, or awesome, which is very sweet too, we're gonna be thinking good job for what, or awesome what, and then we're gonna label it. We're gonna say good sharing, or awesome job keeping your voice down, or thank you for staying calm when she said that or did that. And what we know is that label praise is more powerful in promoting specific behavior change than unlabeled praise, because kids then know what exactly that behavior was that you were praising or trying to say good job for. And so just a quick note about timing here. A label praise is much more effective if you say it right after the behavior happened rather than like waiting a few minutes down the line, especially when somebody is first trying to display that new behavior, so that way they get that kind of immediate feedback of like, hey, that was it. You did it right just now. That was that behavior I was looking for. Okay, so this is one of the handouts that you guys are going to get. Handout 1 has some behaviors that might be considered problematic or concerning. So something like throwing toys is on here as an example. And then it has a place to kind of put down the positive opposite of the behavior. So for throwing toys, that might be like keeping toys on the floor or gentle play. And then it helps you kind of come up with a labeled praise for that new target behavior. So good rolling the car on the floor, or nice building gently, or I like how you're treating our toys gently. And so there's lots of practice on that handout, which will come to you guys after the presentation today. Okay, giving good directions is another good preventative or teaching strategy so that kids really know what to do and what you're looking for. And this slide is another one of the handouts that's available. It has handout 2 has these suggestions on here, and then even more suggestions for how to give directions in certain ways that can increase compliance and prevent some problematic behaviors, especially if you're giving a clear direction for a positive opposite or an incompatible behavior. So some things to keep in mind when you're trying to give really good directions and clear directions to kids. Giving commands only when you need to. I really want people to try and choose their battles. So when a person gives a command, we want it to be a command that that person is going to follow through on. And if it isn't worth it, then maybe don't give it as a command. Save your kind of your energy for other parts of the day or other times when things matter a little bit more to you. So if you can't give something as a command, but you need for it to happen, you can always give a child a choice, which a lot of people and kids really enjoy having a choice. Oh, it's time to get our shoes on. Do you want to wear these shoes or these shoes? And then that way they're moving toward putting their shoes on without you having to give the command of please put your shoes on. If you don't even have time for that, you can say something like, oh, it's time to put your shoes on. I'm helping you put your shoes on. And so that way it helps you save your kind of command juice for times when it really matters to you, or times when you have time to work on following commands. The second suggestion up here is to tell kids what to do, not what not to do. So this is actually harder than it sounds because often our first instinct is like say we see somebody climbing. Our first instinct is probably to be like, stop climbing, or don't climb, or quit climbing. But what is actually more effective is to tell them what to do. So instead of like, stop climbing, we could say something like, feet on the floor, right? Or please sit. And it lets kids know exactly what that behavior is that they need to start doing now. It kind of gives their brains a little bit of a break and kind of skips a few steps. They don't have to be creative and think about what behavior you're looking for. You're telling them what you're looking for right there. The next one is to try and be within 3 feet of the child when you give a command. Some people like to kind of gently touch a shoulder if that's well tolerated by the child while giving a command. So just being closer to a child when giving the command can increase the likelihood that that command is going to be followed. The next one is to try and be brief and simple. So using one-step commands can be really helpful because it helps kids focus, and it's especially a better fit for kids who might have a language delay or might be really young, or kids who might have other developmental differences going on for them too. I think even in our own lives, we like it when we only have like one thing at a time, and we don't have to keep too many things in mind all at once. The last one on here is to try and use gestures or demonstrations whenever we can. So using a gesture or even actually showing the child what the behavior is that you want, like let's say it's like putting the ball in the box. You can even show them like I'm putting the ball in the box and then put it back and then give the command, please put the ball in the box. And that is great, again, for kids with language delays or developmental delays, autism spectrum disorder, or really young kids, little toddlers that might not have all the words that you're kind of throwing at them right now. So I should also put a plug in here for after they comply to try and recognize that. Often I coach people to use a labeled praise, good job putting it in the box, or good listening to directions, things like that. You're going to see more following directions over time if you specifically praise following directions when you can catch it. Okay, so creating good commands is the third handout that you have. I have some kind of indirect or less effective commands on the left-hand side, and then more direct and positive commands on the right. So instead of don't run, we have please walk, stop taking the toys, might be share X with Y. Stop jumping might sound more like please sit down. Don't draw on the table might be like draw on the paper. So we're telling them what to do. So there are a few different examples there, and you can even add your own on there if you hear yourself kind of using some commands that might be a little bit less effective. Okay, so some additional things that are on your handout are things like, making sure that we are not too vague with our commands. So being really specific, so this behave and settle down and watch out. I think that's one that, like, as adults, we think we know what those things mean, but when we really get down to it, that could mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So if by behave you mean use your inside voice, or sit down, please, or put that down, or use gentle hands, those are the things that we should try and say rather than kind of that vague command. The other great thing about making a command specific for a child is that if you make it specific, then you're going to know exactly what you're looking for. If it's feet on the floor, and then once it happens, you're going to know, oh, it happened, and now I can recognize it and give it attention. So you can fill in the blank with some of your own commands, or help a family do that too, potentially. Okay. So this is an example of an effective direct command that you could give when Jane is climbing on the back of the couch. Oh, Michelle's on it. Awesome. So you're gonna fall. Jane, please sit down, or don't climb up there. Yeah, no, that was great. Thank you. Awesome. Yep, that's exactly what I'm thinking. Yep, beautiful. Please sit down is what we're looking for there. It tells the kid exactly what we're looking for so that they can just start doing it. Awesome. Okay. All right. Transition warnings are something that I like to talk about when we suspect that the trigger or the antecedent for kind of a less desirable behavior seems to be like a sudden prompt to change what they're doing, or do something else. So using a transition warning is something that kind of can help out a lot of kids. It's something that comes up more often as an issue or a need for kiddos with autism spectrum disorder, but really is a general tip that helps a lot of kids. So when I think about a transition warning, there are a couple different ways that you can do it. One is simply like a verbal or auditory, like time warning, like, oh, we have 10 minutes left, and then we're gonna sit down for dinner. Oh, just 2 minutes left, and then we're gonna sit down for dinner. And so you give the time warning, you state what's next, and then when you need to make that transition happening, maybe you could play a certain sound on your phone, or you could do like a little song. It's dinner time, it's dinner time. I mean, whatever. Play to your audience, whatever they're gonna like and be into. And then the other type of transition warning, and sometimes I really encourage people often to combine these, would be a visual transition warning. So that could look like iPhone, timer countdown. So the timer on the iPhone actually has a really nice visual feature where it like has a visual where the time like goes away. So that actually helps a lot of people kind of understand a little bit better. As that color goes away, the time is going away. And as I have less color, there's less time left of that activity. You can also purchase like a specific clock for this if you don't want to be like, using your phone all the time. This one on here on the slide is something called the time timer, and you can set it for whatever amount of time you need there. And then as the red goes away, you get closer and closer to time meeting up. And then it has options on if you want it to like vibrate or make a little sound, or how loud you want the sound to be. The other solution for a lot of families is actually kind of borrowing an hourglass timer, like with the sand, from a board game, because then it's just a little visual and it lets the kid know, oh, when the sand is gone, the time is up, and then I move on to something else. It can feel nicer too for a lot of kids too, because then it's kind of like the timer's fault that the time is up. It's not the adult's fault. So that can shift around the feelings a little bit. But yeah, transition warnings really help kids get ready for whatever's next, and a lot of kids will benefit from that. And that lead time can feel really important. I think all of us feel this in our work. If we're told all of a sudden to kind of shift over to a different task, we feel that too. We feel kind of some distress a lot of the time, or at least a lot of people do. And I should mention that some little ones or some kids with autism spectrum disorder might even benefit from having a transition job. So let's say they're over in one area, but we need to get over to the table for dinner or snack or whatever. Maybe giving them a job like, oh, it's time to eat. I'll need help to get things to the table. Here, you can take your spoon. And then having like a physical object to kind of take over and get into the new area, it can be really helpful for kids. Okay. Another strategy that I often use with families would be visual supports and visual schedules. So they provide structure and predictability. They literally let you know what's coming up and help it be more predictable. They can help teach new skills and routines. They can be their own kind of transition warning in a way, especially if you're using it that way. Oh, this one's coming up next. We're going to do this soon. And they can include reinforcement at the end, like if it's a sequence of behaviors like getting ready or something like that, or coming home and like doing snack homework and then like playtime or something like that. And a visual support can be pictures or symbols, clip art, pictures of the actual child doing the activity, whatever it is, or a combination of those different things. For your older kids and for many adults, this looks like a to-do list. That's a visual support too. And they're very helpful for lots of people. Just as some examples, I've got a couple up here for you guys. So like showing the sequence of washing hands or using the potty. Some of them even have like, you can create one that has like Velcro and lets you move it over so that like the child can do that. And sometimes just that act is really fun to rip it off and put it back on. And so, you can use a visual support to even teach like a new behavior. So like if you're just working on potty training for the first time, you can go over the visual before the activity and then step by step point out the different steps. And soon they start to kind of memorize it and maybe even start to use it more independently. And you can always kind of gradually phase yourself out of the use of the visual schedule by just maybe fading your prompting instead of reading it, maybe asking like, ooh, what's next? And kind of pointing to it. And then it's pretty magical. Sometimes they'll really take it on and really like to look at their own schedule to see what's next. And like I mentioned, you can pair the visual schedule with a transition warning. So a teacher or somebody trying to get a child to do a certain sequence might show the visual schedule and then say something like, here, now we're doing this, and in a couple of minutes we're going to do this. And then when it's time to change, okay, now we're on this, and they can actually point to the different pictures. And this can be really great for kids who have autism spectrum disorder and are having trouble with, changing from one activity to another, which can happen. It can be really exciting for a kid to kind of help pick out the pictures or help design it, and that can help increase buy-in. So some of my sessions, we build visual schedules during the session together, and I show the parent kind of how to do it in case it kind of comes up in the future. Let's see. Oh, another great one is just first then prompting. So it's exactly what it sounds like. So, for you guys, I could say maybe something like first webinar, then snack time, or, whatever is coming up for you. Hopefully not like hard work or things like that after webinar. But that simple language of first, then is really great for tiny kids or kids with developmental differences or language delays. And you can really pair first, then language with gestures to help. So, first we're going to wash hands and then we're going to eat, snack. And so you can make it into a visual as well. Basically, first, then visual is like a two-step visual schedule. So that's really helpful for some young kiddos. Okay, so I've talked a lot about proactive strategies, but I wanted to make sure you guys had some reactive strategies too. So these are things that I would commonly recommend when a challenging behavior is happening. And again, we want to try our very best to consider the function of that behavior when we're figuring out how to respond to it. So if we figure out that part of what is keeping a behavior going is gaining attention, whether it's positive or negative attention, then we might consider something like planned ignoring or underreacting to that behavior. So that we are not accidentally feeding that behavior with our attention. So a really good ignore means not talking about the behavior, not looking at the child and trying to keep a really neutral facial expression, which is kind of challenging sometimes. Clearly, if something dangerous is going on in the moment, you cannot fully ignore it. When we have a plan, and when we have a plan to ignore a less desired behavior, we always want to make sure that we're pairing that with giving lots of attention at other times for the desired behavior or the new skill that you are teaching to kind of replace it. And often we do that by giving attention with like a labeled praise. And that makes it really super clear what behavior does get our attention. And it keeps that relationship stronger when we are we're doing planned ignoring, but we're also giving planned attention for the thing that we want to see. It keeps that relationship stronger because nobody likes to be ignored all the time. That really just doesn't feel good. The other thing that giving planned attention for the desired behavior when you see it does is it makes a bigger contrast when we're doing this reactive strategy of ignoring because it looks like a bigger difference when ooh, it was all fun and praise and attention before, but then like the less desirable behavior is happening and ooh, I'm not getting any attention or interaction or response from that. One thing that comes up sometimes is that sometimes a child will kind of look like they're hitting or kicking a friend or a sibling and then kind of looking for some attention or some feedback from that. And so if people are figuring out that's sort of what's going on here, or I think that's what's going on here, what an adult could do and what you can coach families to do is to go to the hurt party first. So let's say Johnny, kicks Sally. Instead of going to Johnny and talking about like, oh no, that was so bad, and kicking is against our rules and things like that. Let's put it on ignore and let's go right to Sally and model for him what an empathetic response to somebody getting hurt would be. We can say, oh gosh, I'm really sorry that happened to you. Maybe you even scoop up little Sally and carry her away and say, that shouldn't happen. You didn't deserve that. And that kind of thing. And then you're giving her lots of attention for that and giving the person who did that behavior less attention. Another way that this plays out sometimes is if you have a kid who maybe has some whininess going on and they're doing some whining or some repetitive question asking. That's something that sometimes we see in individuals with autism spectrum disorder, is asking the same question multiple times. So limiting responses to that. So maybe responding once and then after that saying, oh, conversation over, and then ignoring that. But then when you hear a different verbalization or a different type of question or a different topic, or they start doing something else, giving your attention back to that child. So those are some ways that sometimes doing nothing is actually doing something because you're planning this and you're trying to kind of think about the function of that behavior. Another one that a lot of people are pretty familiar with is removal of something desired. So putting a toy in timeout or losing a reward or a privilege. So let's say you figured out that part of the function of a behavior is to get access to something that the child wants or likes. We would want to really ensure that the undesired behavior did not result in the child getting that desired toy or whatever it is. So like if they hit to get a toy, then we don't want to let them play happily with the toy that they've just, taken, because then we're probably going to see more hitting in the future because that behavior worked for them. Um, and so in this case of like the hitting, we would need to work really hard to teach and reinforce alternative behaviors, which are more proactive strategies, right? Of asking for a turn or patiently waiting or offering a toy trade. But when the hitting behavior does happen, we would want to really make sure that it wasn't working for them or functioning for them to get that desired outcome of getting the toy. Okay, so let's chat just a little bit. Effective ignoring of a minor attention getting behavior looks like doing which of the following during the duration of the behavior. So keeping a neutral facial expression, not talking to the child, not looking directly at the child, or D, all of the above. Alyssa got it with D. Beautiful. That is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about ignoring. That's a big ignore. Good job, Charla. Great. Okay. All right, so some takeaway points. We want to try and create structure and use preventative plans and use planned and purposeful reinforcement when we see the behaviors that we're working on and that we're wanting to see more of. And we want to try and respond using consistency and really consider the function of the behavior to try and fit that situation so we see less of it in the future. I do have a case presentation, which I would love to hear ideas from you all on. This case presentation is about Bob. Bob is 11 and he has autism spectrum disorder and ADHD combined subtype. And let's talk about Bob's behavior, the B first, because that's the information that I usually get when I'm working with people. They come and they say, oh, this kid is doing this thing, and then they describe what that is. I think probably several of you get the same. So the behavior in Bob's case today, for the purpose of our discussion, is non-compliance with directions. So, he is complying the first time with directions about 10 to 25% of the time. And that might look like for him ignoring or continuing the current activity, or maybe protesting, saying no or arguing. The most difficult directions for Bob are things related to bedtime, getting dressed, cleaning up, and getting off of electronics. The most likely time to see non-compliance with directions would be related to maybe getting off of electronics. So when he's on electronics, he doesn't really want to get off. The least likely would be when he's given directions to get ready for a preferred activity. So something that he's excited about going to or doing. So antecedents, some of the antecedents that could be happening for this non-compliance behavior, it really sounds like the main one is a direction or a command is given, right? So the parents are giving directions, sometimes teachers are giving directions, sometimes it's a stop doing X direction, sometimes it's a do Y direction. So it seems like that's our antecedent in this case, is when he's given a direction. The consequence, what do you guys think are some of the consequences for him, or some of the ways that this is working for him right now? So like if he's given a direction to get ready for bed, and he is ignoring that direction, then it might like put off bedtime, or it might put off getting dressed, or it might put off, cleaning up. So it might be a delay or escape, or kind of an escape of an unpreferred. Yeah, it gives him more time. Yes, yes, way to go, Jennifer. So kind of a second possible consequence, he's retaining access to the electronics longer. He's getting access to that preferred activity when he's ignoring the direction to get off of the electronics. And then the other thing, parents are repeating directions multiple times, so it could be possible that he's getting some attention out of this too, or some interaction from his parents. And again, it might not be positive attention, but it's still attention. And so for some kids that functions for them to get that interaction. Okay, So anybody have any proactive ideas on what we could do to help with this situation? So what are some things that we might want to focus on increasing, or like some behaviors that you guys can think of that we would want to see more of? 10 more minutes on your phone before bedtime and use a visual timer. I love it. So yes. So that kind of gets at my first. So strengthening smooth transition behavior. Absolutely. And then the other one I came up with here on this slide is strengthening direction following behavior. And there are a few things we went over today that kind of relate to that. So Alyssa, yeah, strengthening smooth transition behavior by using transition warnings to set it up easier. Maybe using a visual schedule or another visual, like a visual timer. Using labeled praise for any smooth transitions off of devices or other smooth transitions throughout the day. Maybe we can start at times when it's easier for him to transition, and then he gets the idea of, oh, they really like it when I stop that right away. The other thing that I sometimes will do with families is I'll have them earn a little token. So if they can transition off of their iPad easily, like the first time that you tell them, then you get to give them a token, and then the next time they're going to use their device, they get to give you that token and get an extra 5 minutes or whatever is powerful for that child. So sometimes that can be a good one for families. Strengthening direction following behavior. We talked about some of those ways to give really good, effective directions. And we talked about using labeled praise when people do follow directions. And we can even throw incentives in the mix. So depending on how acceptable that is to a family and what types of incentives we're talking about, does not have to be expensive. Doesn't have to be a sticker chart. If they've tried sticker charts and they feel like that's failing, it can be something else. For some kids, getting the chance to choose what they listen to in the car is really powerful, and that would be a powerful incentive for them. Like I talked about, getting extra time doing something that they really enjoy that they're already doing. So they don't have to go out and buy, stacks of prizes or things like that. Oops, sorry. Here we go. Okay. Maybe not. Sorry. Sorry, my phone's ringing. Okay. We can also rearrange the schedule to stack preferred activities after non-preferred. You guys might have heard of this as like grandma's rule at one point or another, where it's the idea of like, oh, yeah, you do your homework first and then you can have a cookie or you can watch TV. Just by simply rearranging the schedule, sometimes you can get some movement toward more compliance, because kids know, oh, I need to do this before I can even get to that other thing that I really like to do. What are some reactive ideas? Bob is not listening to your direction. He is like arguing with you, or he's just ignoring you. What are you going to do? I don't know if anybody has any ideas about this one. In the chat, this one feels like more of a stumper, I think, for you guys. There are no right or wrong answers, just ideas, just spitballing. I think one of the things that might come in here is the idea of like, oh, is he getting attention? Like if we're arguing with him. So I don't know that I want to argue with him a whole bunch, or like give him a whole bunch of like get into a debate with him about whether or not it's time to get off of electronics, for example. So one of my go-to strategies is to try and give minimal retention or underreact to that non-compliance when it's happening. And then just give a simple, very consistent warning. If you don't X, then Y. If you don't get off if you don't hand me the iPad, then you'll lose, whatever the privilege is that you guys have set out ahead of time. The other thing that you can do if you are feeling like this whole iPad thing is related to like retaining access would be to turn off the Wi-Fi in this particular situation so that he no longer really has access to the activity that he wants. With a younger child, it can work to do hand-over-hand prompting to prevent escape from like a less preferred activity. So let's say the direction is related to, putting on a certain article of clothing or something like that. So you give the direction, and then if they don't do it, then you might say, oh, now this is you putting on your shoes, and you can help them by putting your hands over their hands and help guide them through it. So they're not getting out of the command when you've given it. Okay. All right. I have a lot of resources for you all, but I also noticed that we have 6 minutes to have some discussion. So I'm going to try and fly through these a little bit. Um, and then Raneem, let me know if you need to interrupt for anything. This resource handout has all of these things on it, so don't feel like you need to be jotting this down right now. It has all these websites and all this information on it. So you guys are going to get this after the presentation. The first set of kind of resources that I wanted you to have are things about behavior in general, and then also some things about like developmental milestones. Um, that can be handy when we're trying to determine if our expectations and if our directions are appropriate for kids and for our families who are trying to kind of figure that out with their own children. Some training opportunities for you guys. So you're probably already familiar with the Kansas Family Support Center. You've already been connected with these echoes, and these are great training opportunities. There are also some care workshops that are available. Care is for any adult who's working with children or teens to improve relationships and to reduce kind of concerning behaviors. And it stands for Child Adult Relationship Enhancement. And there's a little link. They're free. They're through Children's Mercy, and they're online, so you don't have to go there. Another one that I want people to have would just be some additional resources about, maybe if somebody's having possible developmental differences. So sometimes kids are having language delays or other developmental differences that can contribute to behavioral difficulties. And so early childhood special education programs across the state do screenings to kind of figure out how kids are doing in different areas. I think a lot of you are probably familiar with this, and simply letting parents know when those events are can be really helpful and can help with identifying kids who have delays so they can get some extra free services. Of course, at school age, families can request an evaluation for an IEP if they're needing assistance and being affected by what's going on with them in the school setting. Many of you probably already know about other ways to get families and children involved with their local community mental health centers. I don't think I saw anybody on here who's working for a community mental health center today, but that's a whole network of centers across Kansas, and the link that's in your handout actually gets you to a directory for them, so you can find which one is closest to you, so you can provide that to a family. And then also the Kansas Family Support Center is a good resource for information about referrals to services for behavior and autism related services too. They have a little request help button on their website.